beneath the endless sky, where the rivers curve like silver serpents and the forests rise in whispers of green, there lives a memory older than human breath, older than the first fire. It is a story carried on the voices of wind and water, sung in the rippling light of the stars, told by the Ojibwe people as a truth that exists between the earth beneath their feet and the heavens that arc above. The night sky was never empty to them. Each star was alive, radiant, watching, part of a vast family that shimmered in the dark. To gaze upward was not merely to look at scattered lights, but to witness a gathering of kin, a council of spirits, a realm where beauty lived in its purest form. Among these stars were maidens of light, luminous beings who danced across the heavens. They were more than sparks of fire. They were women of grace, clothed in the shimmer of eternity, with laughter like falling water and voices like songs woven from moonlight. And sometimes, when the veil between worlds grew thin, one of these maidens would descend. It is said that they came down on beams of light, stepping lightly as if the earth itself bent to their softness. They touched the lakes with their bare feet, leaving ripples that glowed as though the water remembered the stars. They wandered through forests where owls blinked at their passing and wolves lifted their muzzles in reverence. They moved with the hush of night, luminous and unearthly, yet curiously tender toward the world they touched. The Ojibwe saw no boundary between the sacred and the earthly. To them, the land was alive, each tree and stone carrying spirit, each animal bearing wisdom, each breeze a messenger. The stars above and the soil below were bound by threads invisible, threads of kinship, longing, and eternal return. In this world, the descent of a maiden from the stars was no accident. It was a sign, a promise, a story waiting to unfold.
Yet, within the shimmer of this myth, there lies something deeper, something that stirs not only reverence, but also desire. For the stories do not speak of maidens who came only to bless or to instruct. They speak of maidens who awakened something more intimate, yearning in the hearts of those who beheld them. To see a star maiden was to stand between awe and temptation, caught in a current that pulled the soul toward beauty it could never fully hold. Thus begins the tale of one such maiden. The nights were long in that season, heavy with the fragrance of pine and cedar. The waters hushed beneath the moon's silver gaze. The people gathered around fires, telling stories of how the stars were once sisters who sang creation into being. They spoke of the northern lights as curtains drawn by celestial hands, revealing glimpses of other realms. Children listened with wide eyes, while lovers leaned closer, feeling the night press against their skin with tender insistence. And above them, the sky shimmered with infinite possibility. Each spark a doorway, each constellation a story. But among all those countless lights, there was one that glowed differently, not brighter, not larger, but alive in a way that made it seem as though it leaned closer to the earth, curious, watchful. From that star came a maiden whose fate was not to remain only among her celestial kin. She longed, though she did not yet know for what. In her heart there was a restless music, a pull toward the earth that beat like a drum beneath her shimmering feet. She felt the weight of human breath rising with the smoke of their fires, smelled the sweetness of their offerings, heard the tender cries of desire that drifted upward in the stillness of the night. For desire does not remain bound to the human realm. It ascends, it calls, it sings to the heavens. And sometimes the heavens answer. The Star Maiden was curious. She had watched the mortals from above, seen their faces lit by firelight, their hands clasped in love and longing, their dances spiraling beneath the moon. She had seen sorrow carve lines across their cheeks, had seen joy burst from their throats like songbirds taking flight. Unlike the eternal calm of the heavens, the earth pulsed with passions, fierce and fleeting, passions that burned and faded but were never forgotten. She wondered what it would be to feel such things in the warmth of flesh, to taste the sweetness of berries ripened in the sun, to walk barefoot on moss still damp from rain.
And so, in the stillness of one fated night, she descended. The forest held its breath as her feet touched the earth. The pines leaned closer, whispering through their needles. The river paused in its rush, cradling her reflection as though unwilling to let it go. The moon tilted its silver face, watching. Even the air seemed thicker, trembling with the sudden presence of something divine and tender. The maiden's body shimmered with the memory of stars, her hair cascading like night itself, her eyes luminous with secrets untold. The Ojibwe say that when a spirit crosses into the human world, the world feels it. The animals grow restless, the air quivers, the fire sparks without reason. That night, hunters on the edge of the woods felt their hearts race without knowing why. Children stirred in their sleep, dreaming of light. Women awoke and looked to the sky, sensing change. And somewhere among them, a young man's fate was being drawn toward her, as inexorably as the tide is drawn to the moon. But we are not yet at his part of the story. That will come later. For now, we linger with her, the Star Maiden, luminous and trembling in her first moments upon the earth. She felt the soil beneath her feet, rich and breathing. She inhaled the scent of cedar smoke drifting from a distant fire. She pressed her hand against the trunk of a birch tree and felt its life humming beneath the bark. Everything was alive in ways she had only watched from afar. Now she could touch it. Now she could taste it. And in her chest something bloomed. Not duty, not divine order, but a delicate ache she did not yet understand.
The ache was desire, though she would not name it so. It was not desire as mortals knew it, urgent and hungry, but a slow unfolding, a recognition that beauty, when witnessed too closely, becomes impossible to ignore. She felt the world brushing against her in ways that made her body hum, the cool grass against her calves, the sigh of the wind against her hair, the warmth of night pressing gently at her skin. She felt both vast and small, eternal and fragile, and in that contradiction she discovered something intoxicating. Above her, the stars shone as though watching, some in approval, some in warning. They knew what mortals did not, that once a star maiden set foot upon the earth, her fate was no longer her own. Desire was a thread, and once it wove itself into her, it could not be easily untangled. She would long, she would ache, she would choose, and in choosing she would change the shape of both heaven and earth. Thus the tale begins with a maiden of starlight, a restless heart, and a night that held its breath, waiting for the inevitable dance of desire that would follow. For myths are not merely stories, they are mirrors. To hear of the Star Maiden is to feel within oneself that same pull, the yearning for something just beyond reach, the beauty that aches precisely because it cannot be held forever. And so, beneath the gaze of stars and the hush of the forest, her story opened like the first notes of a song, soft and trembling, yet destined to swell into a melody that would haunt the earth for generations.
She stood at the threshold of two worlds, luminous against the hush of the earth. And in that moment, the story begins to take shape through her and the one destined to meet her gaze. Every myth has its figures, its hearts that beat at the center of the tale, and here they reveal themselves, one born of light, the other of soil and shadow. The Star Maiden was not like mortals. Her body shimmered with the memory of constellations, as though her very skin carried the glow of countless suns. To look upon her was to feel the sensation of standing at the edge of a dream, fragile, unreal, yet too vivid to deny. Her hair flowed like rivers of night, dark but edged with silvery strands that caught the moonlight. Her eyes were not simply eyes, but pools of endless distance, reflecting the heavens even when lowered toward the earth. When she moved, the air stirred around her, as if it longed to caress her form, as if the world itself wished to hold her close. She was grace embodied, and yet within her glowed something more dangerous, more tender, longing. It clung to her the way dew clings to a blade of grass, subtle but undeniable. The heavens had given her eternity, but eternity was cold. The earth now offered warmth. She carried that contradiction in every gesture, every glance, every breath. To those who might meet her, she would be both unattainable and intimately near, as though she were a flame too distant to touch, yet close enough to burn. The Ojibwe called such beings sacred, for they were not mere visitors, but reflections of the unseen. To see her was to glimpse the mystery that binds heaven and earth, to feel one's heart drawn toward beauty that defies reason. Yet to the story she was not only sacred, she was sensual too. For in her stillness there lingered the promise of movement, of closeness, of something that could unravel the distance between star and soil. She was both danger and gift, a radiant secret stepping barefoot through moss and shadow.
And if she was the embodiment of longing from the heavens, then the young hunter was its echo on the earth. He lived as mortals do, bound by hunger, breath, and the turning of seasons. His life was humble, days marked by the rhythm of footsteps through the forest, nights filled with the glow of fire and the murmur of dreams. He knew the sound of deer moving through thickets, the sharp cry of hawks circling above, the weight of bowstring against his fingers. His clothes bore the marks of labor, stitched from leather, fringed with beads and feathers gifted by his kin. His body was not luminous like hers, but it carried the strength of earth, muscles carved by work, skin touched by sun and wind, eyes deep with patience and quiet yearning. He was not remarkable among men, yet myths rarely choose the proud or the mighty. Instead, they choose the ones who listen to the silence, who feel the stir of longing, even when they cannot name it. The young hunter was such a man. He carried within him a hunger not only for food, not only for survival, but for something beyond the visible horizon. When he lifted his eyes to the stars, he did not see cold fire. He felt the ache of distance, as though something was calling him upward, as though part of him belonged to a sky he could never reach. It was this ache that marked him, though he did not know it. For when the Star Maiden stepped into the forest, luminous and trembling with her own unspoken desire, it was his spirit that answered. Like two notes from different songs finding harmony, their longings called to one another across the gulf of existence. He, bound to earth but restless. She, bound to heaven but curious. Between them lay the promise of something that would wound and heal, bind and unmake. But before their eyes could meet, the story reminds us of her celestial kin. The maidens of the stars were not solitary. They were a family, a chorus of radiant sisters who danced together across the heavens. They moved as one, shimmering threads woven into the vast fabric of night. To them, the descent of a single sister was not simple curiosity. It was a breach, a danger, a risk to the harmony they had always known. They were protective, distant yet watchful, their glow like silent warnings written across the sky. From above, they watched the lone Star Maiden drift away, their light steady but cool, filled with both love and fear. They knew what she did not yet know, that once touched by earthly desire, she could never fully return. The heavens demand eternity, while the earth demands change. To walk between them was to fracture, to ache, to choose. And so they shone in their constellations, guardians of her memory, silent witnesses to what she would soon surrender. These three, the Star Maiden, the young hunter, and the distant celestial kin, form the heart of the tale. Around them, the forest whispers, the rivers gleam, the fires burn low, but it is their desires that set the myth aflame. She, radiant and ethereal, embodying grace that aches with unspoken longing. He,
mortal and humble, carrying within him a yearning that reaches beyond his place on earth. And above them, the stars, both protective and forbidding, their distance a reminder that beauty is never free from cost. The contrast between them is the tension that holds the story. She shines with the cold purity of heaven. He pulses with the warmth of mortal blood. She belongs to eternity. He belongs to time. She embodies what is untouchable. He embodies the ache to touch. And yet it is precisely in this contrast that attraction sparks. For opposites do not merely repel, they draw one another into dangerous, beautiful collisions. To the listener, the characters are not strangers. We recognize ourselves in them. Who has not looked upward and felt the pull of beauty beyond reach? Who has not walked the earth and longed for something more, something luminous and unattainable? The Star Maiden and the Hunter are mirrors of our own desires, our own contradictions. Through them, the myth becomes addictive, for it speaks the language of every heart that has ever ached for more than it could hold. As the firelight flickers in the story's telling, one can almost see them. Her, stepping softly through the forest, her body glowing like a promise. Him, unaware that his life is about to change, his heart already leaning toward her presence. The stars above, silent and stern, watching with the inevitability of fate. They do not yet speak, they do not yet touch, but the air between them is already alive with tension, charged with the electricity of desire. This is the gift of myth, to let us linger at the edge of encounter, to hold us trembling with anticipation before the first gaze, the first word, the first brush of fate. We are not yet at the meeting, not yet at the kiss of longing and surrender, but we know it is coming. We can feel it in the hush of the forest, in the glow of the sky, in the restless stirrings of two hearts that do not yet know each other's names. Thus the stage is set and the characters revealed. The Star Maiden, ethereal and radiant, clothed in starlight, embodying longing and grace. The young hunter, mortal and humble, yearning and earthbound. The celestial kin, distant and protective, guardians of what she risks and what she leaves behind. Together they form the constellation of this tale, a geometry of desire that will guide the myth forward. And beneath their presence lies the unspoken promise that when heaven bends to earth and earth lifts its gaze to heaven, something inevitable, dangerous, and intoxicating will awaken. The night was hushed, wrapped in the velvet silence that lingers when the moon hangs high and the world holds its breath. The hunter moved through the forest with the ease of one accustomed to its shadows. His steps were careful, light, guided by instinct and the faint glimmer of moonlight through the branches. He sought nothing extraordinary, only the rhythm of survival. Perhaps a deer, perhaps a rabbit, perhaps a quiet moment to breathe beneath the stars. But fate has a way of revealing itself not in grand gestures, but in stillness, in moments when one looks up and sees the impossible made real. As he paused near a clearing, bow in hand, he felt it first as a trembling in the air. The night was alive in a new way, the silence not empty, but charged, quivering like the pause before a song. Then, through the parting clouds, he saw her descend. She came upon a shaft of light, her body woven of shimmer and shadow. Her bare feet touched the grass as if it had been waiting for her, bending without breaking, welcoming her weightless tread. Her hair cascaded around her like rivers of midnight, tipped with silver fire, and her eyes glowed with a radiance that seemed not of this world. She was luminous and yet tangible, a flame that moved, a dream clothed in flesh. The hunter froze, his breath caught in his chest. For all his life he had known the stars only as distant fires, scattered jewels set in the dark, untouchable and cold. Now one stood before him, warm and breathing, radiant with a beauty that pierced him to the marrow. Desire struck him like an arrow, swift and merciless. His knees weakened, his fingers trembled, and yet he could not look away.
She bent to touch the earth, pressing her palm against the moss, lifting her eyes to the trees as though greeting old companions. There was no fear in her, only a deep tenderness, as though she were relearning the world with each gesture. To the hunter, every movement was agony and wonder. The tilt of her head, the curve of her lips as she breathed, the way her body shimmered as though she carried the sky within her skin. He wanted her with a fierceness that frightened him, not merely to touch, but to be near, to be seen, to matter in her gaze. His body ached with longing, his soul surged with reverence. He was torn between the urge to fall to his knees in worship and the reckless desire to step forward, to press himself against her warmth, to know what it meant to hold a piece of the heavens. And she, though radiant, was not untouched by him. The Star Maiden felt the weight of his gaze before she saw him. It burned across her skin, not cruel, but insistent, as though his longing reached her like a hand across the distance. When her eyes found him at the edge of the clearing, half hidden in shadow, she felt something stir deep within her chest. He was mortal, yes, his form shaped by hunger and time, his clothes marked by labor, his body carrying the scent of earth and smokestack. But in his eyes there was something more, a yearning as vast as the sky she had left behind. It frightened her, that yearning. It called to her, it tempted her. It was not the calm, endless radiance of her celestial kin, but a fire that threatened to consume. His gaze promised not eternity, but immediacy, a warmth that might blaze brightly even if it faded quickly. She had never been looked at that way before, not by her sisters among the stars, not by the endless expanse of heaven. In his eyes, she was not merely luminous, she was desired. Curiosity tangled with fear. She wondered, what would it be to step into that fire, to let herself be seen not as divine, but as woman?
What would it be to taste the urgency of mortal love, the kind that aches precisely because it knows its own fragility? Yet even as the thought bloomed, she felt the weight of her duty pressing upon her. She belonged to the sky. Her sisters were watching, their light a distant reminder of the place she had left behind. She was not meant to linger here, not meant to surrender to the gravity of human desire. But desire is not so easily ignored. She took a step toward him, and the hunter's breath faltered. He felt the blood pounding in his veins, his body alive with tension he could not contain. His bow slipped from his fingers, forgotten. His lips parted as though words might come, but no sound emerged. The air between them thickened, pulsing with an energy that made the forest itself tremble.
Their gazes locked, and in that instant the world seemed to collapse into only them. The trees faded, the stars dimmed, the river's murmur silenced. All that remained was the ache that stretched between them, fragile and burning, a thread that drew them closer, even as it warned of the chasm beneath. For a moment, the maiden allowed herself to feel it fully, the warmth that blossomed in her chest, the rush of heat across her skin, the way her body seemed to lean toward him without her willing it. She felt alive in a way she had never known, not eternal, not untouchable, but raw, trembling, vulnerable. She wanted to know the taste of his lips, the weight of his hands, the sound of his breath entangled with hers. The thought alone made her shiver, her glow intensifying as if desire itself fed her light. Yet even in that intoxication, the echo of her kin whispered, "Remember who you are. Remember where you belong." She stood torn, the pull of heaven and earth tearing at her heart. To surrender would be bliss, but bliss with consequence. To resist would be safety, but safety laced with sorrow. The hunter sensed her hesitation, though he could not name it. To him she was possibility incarnate, a miracle standing within reach. His body trembled with need, but deeper still was his awe. He dared not move closer, fearing she might vanish like a dream if he did. And yet his silence spoke louder than any words, a plea, a confession, a worship of her beauty and the desire it awakened. The forest held its breath as they lingered in this fragile balance, the maiden radiant and trembling with curiosity, longing, and fear. The hunter rooted in awe, aching with need he could not contain. Above them the stars glittered, their cold light a reminder of the gulf that separated them. And yet here, in the hush of night, that gulf narrowed to a single gaze, a single breath, a single heartbeat suspended in anticipation. This was conflict, but it was also promise. She could not belong fully to him, nor could she remain untouched by what she felt. He could not claim her, nor could he turn away. Desire bound them in its invisible chains, sweet and merciless. The Ojibwe tell the story, not only to speak of beauty, but to remind us that longing itself is sacred. It is the bridge between worlds, the trembling ache that reveals what we truly seek. In the gaze of the hunter and the hesitation of the Star Maiden lies the essence of the myth, the recognition that desire is both blessing and burden, both fire and shadow, both gift and wound. And so they stood in silence, each trembling for the other, the world around them pulsing with their unspoken yearning. The maiden torn between love and duty, the hunter overwhelmed by awe and longing, the stars watching with cold, unyielding light. Conflict and desire had awakened, and nothing would ever again be as it was before.
The air itself seemed to tremble as the Star Maiden lingered before him, her body luminous against the hush of the forest. The hunter could scarcely breathe. He had dreamed of nothing like this, not even in the restless visions that came to him beneath the glow of the moon. Yet here she was, a being woven of starlight and longing, gazing at him with eyes that held both eternity and uncertainty. She took another step forward, and the world seemed to close around them, as though the night desired them to be alone. The trees bent inward, branches heavy with silence, while the river slowed its song to a hushed murmur. Even the stars above, countless and watchful, seemed to dim their light so that the brilliance between them might shine brighter. The hunter felt his chest ache with the intensity of it. His body quivered with restraint, torn between fear of breaking the spell and the irresistible pull that urged him closer. Slowly, with hands that trembled despite his strength, he reached toward her. He did not dare touch, not yet, but the gesture was a confession. I see you. I want you. I am yours, if you wish it. The maiden looked at his hand, then at his face. Her lips parted in a breath that shimmered like silver smoke, her glow intensifying as her heart raced in rhythms unfamiliar even to herself. She had known eternity, serenity, the endless dance of her sisters in the heavens, but never this. Never the trembling warmth that surged through her body at the nearness of a mortal. Never the dizzying vulnerability of being desired not as a star, but as a woman. At last, she placed her hand in his. The touch was electric, a meeting of fire and sky. His skin, roughened by bowstrings and bark, closed around her delicate fingers, and she felt herself anchored in a way she had never known. He, in turn, felt her light pulse through him, racing through his veins like heat, making his heart pound as though it might shatter his ribs. The forest seemed to release its breath in that instant, as though it had been waiting for this union.
Neither spoke. Words would have only broken the spell. Instead, they stepped closer, drawn together by something older than speech, older than reason. His arms rose, hesitant at first, then firmer, wrapping around her glowing body. She pressed against him, her cheek against his chest, listening to the wild thunder of his heartbeat. To her, it was the most intoxicating music she had ever heard. To him, her warmth against his body was like holding the very essence of night and light entwined. The maiden tilted her face upward, and their eyes met again. Desire burned there, raw and fragile, mingled with awe. Slowly, as though guided by the moon itself, their lips met. The kiss was not gentle at first. It was trembling, hungry, desperate, a confession poured into the meeting of mouths. He tasted her like fire wrapped in sweetness, like water touched by lightning. She tasted him like earth, like breath,
like life itself. Their bodies leaned into each other, their hands exploring, not with conquest, but with reverence, each touch a discovery, each brush of skin a promise. The hunter's fingers slid through her hair, marveling at how it shimmered like strands of night threaded with silver. The maiden traced the line of his jaw, feeling the warmth of living flesh, the coarse stubble that pricked her hand in ways that thrilled her. When he kissed her again, slower this time, it was as though the stars themselves descended to witness, pouring their glow over the clearing. The forest no longer watched in silence. It joined in. The river gleamed brighter, reflecting their union in ripples of silver. The trees swayed with the rhythm of their breaths. A soft breeze wrapped around them, carrying the scent of pine, smoke, and something sweeter, the fragrance of desire unbound. The earth itself seemed to cradle them, holding this fragile miracle as though it too longed for their closeness. They lay upon the moss, the maiden radiant against the green, her body glowing as though every blade of grass carried her starlight. The hunter's body moved with hers, not in conquest, but in surrender, as if he feared she might vanish if he did not hold her close. His lips trailed along her skin, tasting moonlight where it lingered, each kiss a vow unspoken. She shivered beneath him, her body arching with sensations she had never known, sensations that made her glow brighter, until it seemed the whole clearing was lit by her ecstasy.
Her fingers clutched at his shoulders, tracing the strength carved by labor, the warmth that pulsed through him. He was not eternal, not unchanging, and that fragility made every touch sweeter. She wanted to remember it all, the texture of his skin, the sound of his breathing, the way his body trembled against hers. For in him she discovered what the heavens could never give, the fleeting intensity of mortal love, the fire that burns hotter because it cannot last forever. He, in turn, worshipped her not as a goddess, but as a woman. His hands moved reverently, exploring, learning, cherishing. He kissed her lips, her neck, the hollow of her throat, each touch guided by awe as much as desire. When she moaned softly beneath him, the sound nearly undid him. He pressed his forehead to hers, eyes closed, whispering words he did not know he had carried, words of longing, words of devotion, words that promised he would never let her go. And she answered not with words, but with her body, with the way she drew him closer, wrapping herself around him as though she wished to merge entirely. Their breaths tangled, their hearts raced in unison, their skin grew damp with heat. The stars above flared brighter, as if echoing their climax, as if the heavens themselves could not remain unmoved by their union. In that moment, the line between heaven and earth dissolved. There was no star and no hunter, no celestial and no mortal. There was only two bodies entwined, two souls burning, two hearts surrendering. They became one. her light mingling with his warmth, his earth grounding her sky, their passion weaving a new constellation unseen by others, but carved forever into their own memory.
Afterward, they lay together, the maiden curled against him, her glow softened to a gentle shimmer. His hand traced patterns along her back, as though afraid she might slip away into the night. She listened to the steady beat of his heart, the sound anchoring her more firmly than any star ever could. Neither spoke, for language felt too small, but their silence was not emptiness. It was fullness, the kind that comes when bodies and souls have said all that needs saying. Yet even in the warmth of their union, a shadow lingered. Above them, the stars glittered cold and distant. Her sisters still watched, their light a reminder of what she had left, of what she had risked. She closed her eyes, pressing closer to the hunter, willing herself to forget. For now she wanted only this: his arms, his warmth, the fleeting eternity they had carved together on the moss. The hunter too felt it, the fragile edge of the moment. He held her tighter, as though to anchor her to him, as though desire alone could bind her to earth. He did not know how long she would stay, nor what it might cost. But he knew this: he had touched the heavens, and the heavens had touched him in return. Whatever came next, his life was no longer his own. The night lingered, endless in its beauty. Moonlight painted their skin silver, starlight wove itself into their breath, and the forest hummed with the secret it now carried. For this was not merely a kiss, nor merely a joining of bodies. It was the climax of longing itself, the place where desire became creation, where heaven bent low enough to taste earth, and earth reached high enough to hold the stars. It was the union that myths are born from, a moment so fragile, so luminous, that the world itself leaned closer to remember.
The forest was still, but within that silence a hidden tension grew. The hunter lay with the star maiden in his arms, her glow softened into a silver haze that clung to his skin. Her body was warm against him, her breathing delicate, her face tilted toward his chest as though she wished never to rise again. He stroked her hair in slow, reverent movements, unwilling to let even a breath break the fragile eternity they had created. Yet eternity is a gift mortals cannot hold. From above, faint but steady, a call began to weave its way into the clearing. At first it was subtle, a hum too soft to notice, like the far-off echo of a river beneath ice. But she heard it, even as she tried to ignore it. It was not sound, but memory, not voice, but duty. The song of her celestial kin stretched through the fabric of the night, tugging at her soul with invisible threads. She stiffened. The hunter felt it immediately, her glow shifting, her breath trembling, her body curling inward as though a shadow had touched her. He pulled her closer, whispering words meant to soothe, that she was safe, that he would hold her forever. But in her eyes,
luminous and suddenly wet with tears, he saw the truth. "I hear them," she whispered, though no sound left her lips. Her gaze lifted toward the heavens, where the stars pulsed with cold light. They were not indifferent. They were summoning her. Their distant brilliance, once merely backdrop, now loomed with unbearable insistence. The hunter followed her gaze and felt a cold ache settle in his chest. He knew. He did not need explanation. Mortals do not keep stars. Still, he would not let go. He kissed her forehead, her eyelids, her trembling lips. "Stay," he murmured, his voice raw, his hands desperate against her back. "Stay with me. The earth can be your sky. My arms can be your home." The maiden closed her eyes and let his words sink into her heart, filling her heart with longing sharper than any wound. She wanted it. Oh, how she wanted it. To remain here, to be touched not by the cold expanse of infinity, but by the warmth of one man's love. But as she held him, her glow began to throb with the rhythm of her sister's call. It was growing stronger. The stars were not pleading, they were commanding. Her tears glimmered like fragments of constellations as she cupped his face. "If love alone could bind me, I would never leave you," she said, her voice breaking like moonlight on restless water. "But I belong to them as you belong to the earth." The words shattered him. He clutched her as though to anchor her body to his, as though the strength of his arms could defy the heavens. She pressed herself against him one last time, her lips tracing his cheek, his neck, his chest, memorizing the taste of mortality. Their breaths tangled in frantic urgency, as though they could drink each other's souls before the separation. Then the glow within her body began to swell. It was painful, radiant, irresistible. She shuddered in his embrace, torn between staying and descending, her skin flickering with the brilliance of a breaking star. He cried out, not with words, but with raw anguish, clutching her tighter even as her body grew light in his arms. The moss beneath them glowed as her radiance seeped into it, the air trembling with the force of her celestial bond. "Don't go," he whispered, his voice a plea, a wound. His forehead pressed against hers, sweat and tears mingling. "Please, don't leave me in this darkness." Her lips brushed his one final time, tender and lingering, a kiss that carried every unsaid vow, every dream unfinished. When she pulled away, it was not by choice, but by gravity of the heavens. Her body lifted from his arms like mist rising from water. He reached after her, his hands clawing at the air, but already her feet no longer touched the moss. Already her form lured into starlight. She looked down at him, her eyes filled with love and sorrow too vast to contain. "Remember me," she whispered. "Remember and look to the sky." And then she was gone. The clearing fell into darkness as her glow was pulled upward, the threads of light weaving her back into the heavens.
The stars above brightened, pulsing in rhythm, as though welcoming their daughter home. Yet where she had lain, the earth was bare, the moss still warm, but fading quickly to chill. The hunter fell to his knees, his chest hollow, his hands reaching to nothing. The silence of the forest pressed in around him, deafening. The warmth of her touch still lingered on his skin, but already it felt like memory. He tilted his head back, tears streaking his face, and stared into the sky. Among the countless stars, one shone brighter, flickering faintly, as though it still remembered his embrace. He lifted his hand toward it, his voice breaking in a cry that dissolved into the night. But no answer came, only the vast, unyielding sky. Still he could not look away. Each night thereafter he returned to the clearing. Each night he lay upon the moss where they had once joined, staring at the heavens with eyes raw from yearning. And each night he searched for her among the stars, whispering words into the darkness, hoping she would hear. The earth fed him, the river quenched him, but it was the sky that kept him alive. For though she was gone, her memory burned within him like fire. He carried her glow in his heart, a wound that would never heal, a light that would never dim. Seasons shifted around him. Summer gave way to autumn, autumn to winter, and still he returned. Snow fell thick upon his shoulders, but he did not move from the clearing. He spoke to the sky through frost-bitten lips, his words rising like smoke. In spring, when wildflowers bloomed, he laid them upon the moss where her body had once rested, as though offering gifts to a shrine. His people whispered about him. Some said he had gone mad, bewitched by a spirit he could never possess. Others said he had been blessed, touched by a being beyond mortal measure, chosen for a love greater than life. But he did not answer them. His heart belonged to the clearing, to the sky, to her. At times, when the night was especially clear, he thought he saw her. A shimmer between the branches, a flicker of light that seemed too near, too warm. Once he even felt a breeze that carried her fragrance, the faint sweetness of celestial blossoms. He reached into the air, trembling with hope, but always the vision dissolved into nothing, leaving only emptiness behind. But even emptiness could not kill his devotion, for in longing he still felt alive. The hunter became old, his hair streaked with silver like the moonlight he worshipped. His body weakened, but his heart remained fierce in its devotion. And when his time came, when his breath slowed, when his pulse quieted, it was in the clearing that he lay down, his final gaze fixed upon the sky, his lips moving in silent prayer, that she might welcome him
once more. And as his eyes closed for the last time, a single star flared brighter than all the rest, glowing like a promise that even death could not sever what love had bound.
There are stories that linger, not because they are whole, but because they ache. The tale of the Star Maiden is such a story, a weaving of beauty and sorrow, of desire that dares to cross the boundaries of heaven and earth. It is not a myth meant to soothe, it is a myth meant to haunt. And perhaps that is why it endures, whispered beneath star-strewn skies, carried in the hush of wind that bends the branches of old forests. The hunter and the maiden were never meant to belong to the same world. He was soil and bone, bound to the cycles of season and decay. She was radiance and infinity, a being of light whose home was the eternal dance of constellations. Yet for a brief span of nights, those two realms touched. They brushed against each other in trembling wonder, in tenderness and passion, in the warmth of bodies entwined beneath the witness of the moon. And in that touching, something eternal was born. To speak of their union is not to recount a conquest, nor a possession, but an opening. She did not descend to be captured, nor did he ascend to conquer. Instead, they each discovered in the other what they lacked. For him, the taste of the infinite. For her, the intimacy of the finite. In his arms, she learned what it was to be fragile, to be held not as a star, distant and adored, but as a woman whose skin could be caressed, whose breath could be cherished. In her presence, he learned that desire is not bound by mortality, that yearning can bridge even the gulf between heaven and earth. Yet desire, by its very nature, is never still. It moves, it surges, it aches. And sometimes it must break. The moment she returned to the sky, the story shifted from fulfillment to loss. The hunter's devotion became his torment. The moss that once held her warmth grew cold, yet he returned night after night, unable to release the memory. In that yearning lies the essence of the myth, not the joy of possession, but the ache of absence. For absence, paradoxically, makes love eternal. Presence fades, but longing endures. Look to the sky on a clear night, and you will see it. The stars are not only distant fires, they are wounds, gleaming reminders of what we cannot touch. They are both promise and denial, beauty and cruelty. Each one might be her, or might not. That ambiguity is what keeps the hunter's story alive. His love was never resolved, never given closure, and in that lack of closure lies its power. The Ojibwe people, in telling this story, remind us that life is woven between two worlds, the world of spirit and the world of flesh. The maiden embodies the spirit, vast and untouchable, while the hunter embodies flesh, yearning and bound. When they come together, the two worlds momentarily merge, but the balance of the cosmos pulls them apart again. It is a truth older than time, that heaven and earth are lovers doomed to glance at one another across an impossible divide. Yet doomed love is not meaningless. On the contrary, it is the very seed of beauty. What would the stars mean to us if not for their distance? Would we gaze upward in wonder if they could be plucked from the sky like fruit from a branch? It is precisely because they cannot be reached that we cherish them. So too with love. The loves that slip through our fingers, the desires that remain unfulfilled, the embraces that end too soon. These are the ones that burn deepest, the ones that carve themselves into memory. The Star Maiden's story whispers that love is not measured by its permanence, but by its intensity. One night of passion can outweigh a lifetime of indifference. One kiss stolen against the fabric of destiny can echo for generations. The hunter's sorrow is real, but so is his gift. He touched eternity. Few mortals can say as much. In this way, the story is both a warning and a blessing. It warns us of desire that reaches beyond its rightful bounds, of the pain that comes from longing for what can never stay. Yet it blesses us with the knowledge that such longing, even in its pain, illuminates the heart. The hunter's grief is heavy, but it is luminous. His life, though marked by absence, is also marked by depth. And perhaps that is what the maiden gave him most of all. Not her permanence, but his own awakening. Think of her then, not only as a star, but as a mirror. She reflects back to us our own desires, our own aching to be touched by something greater than ourselves. She is the embodiment of the universal human truth, that we are always reaching, always yearning, always stretching our hands towards something we can almost, but never fully, grasp.
And yet, what would life be without that reach? The stars would still burn whether or not we gazed at them. The heavens would still turn indifferent to our desires. But we, as mortals, would be less. It is in the act of reaching, in the act of loving against the odds, that our hearts discover their fullest shape. The hunter reached for her, knowing she might never stay, and in that reach he revealed the boundless depth of human love. This is why the story endures, not because it ends happily, but because it does not end at all. The hunter's devotion lives on in every gaze we cast upward, in every sigh we release beneath the constellations. The maiden lives on in the shimmer of each star, in the idea that somewhere above us beauty still listens. And so the myth becomes a reflection of our own lives. We too love across impossible distances. We too lose what we most desire. We too live in the tension between what we are given and what we long for. But the myth teaches us that even in loss there is beauty. Even in absence there is presence. Even in sorrow there is light. The next time you find yourself beneath the night sky, pause.
let your eyes wander across the darkness until they catch upon a star that seems to flicker just a little differently, just a little closer, just a little warmer. Let yourself imagine that it is her, the Star Maiden, radiant and eternal, still watching, still remembering. And let yourself feel, if only for a moment, the ache of the hunter's longing, the sweetness of their fleeting union, the endless dance of desire between heaven and earth.
For myths are not only about gods and spirits, they are about us, about the landscapes of our hearts, the shadows of our yearnings, the light of our most fragile hopes. The Star Maiden is not only a figure in the sky, she is the echo within every human soul that has ever looked upward and whispered, "Stay." But she does not stay. She returns to the sky, and we are left below. And yet, in that leaving, she gives us the gift of wonder. For as long as there are stars, as long as there are hearts capable of longing, her story will live on. And perhaps that is the deepest truth of all, that love does not die when lovers part. Love transforms. It becomes memory. It becomes light. It becomes the very pulse of the universe. We carry it within us, and we project it outward, shaping the way we see the world. The hunter's gaze, fixed upon the heavens, is our gaze. His yearning is our yearning. His loss is our lesson. Thus the myth closes not with despair, but with a kind of sacred ache. The kind of ache that makes us human. The kind of ache that reminds us that beauty is never ours to own, only ours to touch for a moment, to remember forever. And so, when the night is quiet and the stars are bright, remember her. Remember the maiden who descended for love, who gave herself to a mortal for one luminous embrace, and who returned to the sky carrying both joy and sorrow in her heart. Remember the hunter, whose arms were emptied, yet whose soul was filled with the fire of eternal devotion. Remember them, and know that you too are part of this endless dance. For love is the thread that binds heaven and earth, desire and loss, light and shadow, and in that thread, fragile, unbreakable, luminous, lies the story of us all.